Good evening. Welcome to Supernormal M. This will be the last what one might consider to be a repost from Paranormal M. If you've already heard this particular set of stories over there, I encourage you to go to my earlier videos. This weekend and onward will all just be brand new stuff. And a special shout out to two particular members of the Patreon. One buying a sandwich for me and two for my dogs, and the other looking like they might haunt me in a good way. Thanks for the support. On to the stories. Wings in the Midnight Sky. I want to start this off by making it very clear. What I'm about to share is real. It isn't a short story or something I made up on a late night. Sure as heck isn't put through any sort of software in order to correct everything I'm saying and change information slightly. This happened to me. Something that I've carried quietly for years, in fact. I'm sharing it here in hopes that maybe somebody out there has seen something like it too, or maybe has an explanation. I know it sounds unbelievable, but I know my truth, and this night changed the way I see the whole world. I should also say, throughout my life, I've had a number of strange spiritual experiences. I wouldn't say I'm religious in a traditional sense, but I do believe in God. I've seen too many unexplainable things to not believe. When this happened, I was 18. I'm 22, and it still feels vivid. It was a freezing night in late fall, either late November or early December 2019. I was with my ex-boyfriend, and we were bored and restless. Decided to go outside to watch the stars like we often did. It was past midnight, maybe 12:45. So we bundled up in hoodies and coats and grabbed a big old quilt, laid down in the middle of the backyard. We talked for hours about everything and nothing at the same time. Excuse me, need a drink. Yeah, so for hours, we talked about everything and nothing. The kind of conversation only night can hold. And at one point, though, the mood shifted, and he told me he didn't believe in anything beyond this life. No heaven, no God, nothing after death. I told him I respected that, but I couldn't agree. I've always felt there was something bigger, and I'd seen too much to dismiss it, honestly. He just said, half smirking, "If I ever see something real, then maybe I'll believe." We let the silence settle between us after that. And then we went back to joking and pointing at constellations we didn't know the names of. And that's when it happened. I caught a sight of something drifting silently across the sky. At first, I thought it was a cloud or a bird, but then I realized it wasn't like either of those things. And above us was a pair of enormous luminous wings. No body, no head, no tail, just wings. They must have stretched at least 20 feet wide and had a faint silvery glow to them, almost like moonlight shining through smoke. They were translucent, but real and tangible. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't fear exactly, it was awe. The kind of feeling that freezes you. Not because you're scared, but because your brain can't keep up, you know. My ex didn't notice until I whispered and then yelled at him to look. The moment he tilted his head up, he went pale. He swore loudly and scrambled up from the blanket with his whole body being tense. The wings didn't flap wildly like a bird. They glided slow and graceful. And with just one long silent stroke, they passed above us and vanished beyond the roofline, as if melting into the night. He grabbed my arm and insisted we go inside, and his hands were shaking. We barely spoke after that. Neither of us slept much. The next evening, despite how shaken we were, we went back outside. We didn't see the wings again, but we did witness two blinding lights hovering low. Too close to be stars, too still to be planes. For at least a moment, everything felt unreal, like we had stepped outside of what we understood. And ever since then, I've looked at the sky differently. The world isn't as simple as I used to think. And after that winter, strange news started rolling in. COVID and wars and spy balloons and odd global events. I know none of it's necessarily connected, but after that night, I stopped believing in coincidences so easily. And I've searched endlessly to find somebody who might have seen something kind of similar. I mean, I've talked to people who've seen lights and shadows and odd shapes, but the wings are harder to explain. Angel or interdimensional being or something else entirely. I guess I may never have an answer. And that's something I've learned to live with. Believe me or not, this happened, and if somebody out there has seen anything like it, I hope this reaches you. The man in the hallway. To start this one off, my aunt has always lived with one foot in the spiritual world. She's done tarot readings and crystal gazing and palm readings and tea leaf readings, you name it. She's tried it. Her house is filled with strange trinkets, dream catchers and old candle jars and little figurines that seem to follow you with their eyes. She even keeps an old Ouija board in the living room like it's a decorative piece of art. When I was a kid, I thought she was the coolest person in the family, while most relatives thought she was a bit eccentric. I adored how she'd pull cards and tell me stories about spirits and energy. She always told me that I had a gift. I could sense things most people could not. She wasn't wrong, though. I mean, I've always felt things. I can tell when a room isn't empty even if no one's there. It's like my skin wakes up before my brain does. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. I help my aunt and uncle by cleaning their house every so often. They're in their 70s now, after all. And usually they're home when I come by, though. At this time, the house was empty. No big deal, I have a key. Walked in, dropped my bag in the kitchen, called my uncle to let him know I was there. And then it hit me. The air changed. My shoulders tightened. Every hair on the back of my neck was standing. I got those familiar goosebumps and I froze halfway to the sink. My brain immediately thought, great, she probably forgot to cleanse the house again. Or maybe she'd left that Ouija board open. Well, I tried to brush it off and started cleaning, but the feeling grew heavier, like someone was quietly standing in the hallway just watching me, not threatening, just present. So I whispered, "It's okay, I'm just here to clean, you can stay there." The image came to me slowly, like a photograph developing. A tall, lean man in his 50s, close-cropped black hair, wearing a pale brown work uniform. I didn't recognize him, and that confused me because in the past the only spirits I'd felt were relatives who'd passed away. About 45 minutes later, the air lightened, and whatever was there, it faded. And by the time my aunt and uncle came home, I'd finished half the house but bolted out the door like a kid avoiding chores. The next day I called my aunt. I told her what I saw. There was a long pause on the other side of the line, and then she quietly said, "That sounds like Mark." When they first bought the house, a friend named Mark helped them check the wiring. He forgot to cut the power when he was electrocuted. And right there in the hallway, I'd never heard the story before, but the way I described him is, she said it was basically exactly that. I went completely silent, cold all over, and my mom later confirmed it and told me they never mentioned it to me. And as a child, I wouldn't be scared of visiting the house, but my aunt cried a little, saying she was grateful he was still keeping an eye on things after all these years. Now, whenever I go to clean, I quietly say hello to him, but the second I step inside, I Haven't felt him since that day. And I think I know that he's still there. And this one time, I'm outside of this building. This is me talking now. Outside of this building that I'm attempting to rent, and this guy, there's no power in the place, and I'm like, well, I can't see the place. I can't see, and motorcycle headlights do not suffice to look through a building, so this electrician comes over. Pretty old, gray hair, Vietnamese, and his eyes are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. They looked like glaciers. And I attempted to try to figure out how to ask this guy he's Vietnamese and his eyes were so blue. He told me he was electrocuted 3 times. Anybody know that can change your eye color? Because I didn't. Don't know why I'm even telling you this. Moving on. The Watcher at the Hallway. My grandmother, she passed away this March. She lived in an old house where I spent most of my late teenage years and early 20s. When my parents split up, a messy, drawn-out divorce when I was 15, my father and I packed up everything we could carry, and we moved in with her. I'd visited a few times as a little kid, but she'd always been a quiet, guarded woman who preferred solitude. The house stands on what used to be a stone cellar from a railway depot. It burned down in the late 1800s. The stones were salvaged afterward and became part of the foundation, actually. So that being said, the place is over 130 years old, and rumor has it the cellar was once used to shelter railway workers during winter storms. And later the house became part of a convent where nuns took care of children left behind. My grandmother survived the post-war years, and somewhere along the way she grew a fascination with porcelain dolls. Over her lifetime, she collected nearly 1,500 of them. Damn. There was one that always unsettled me. A big one the size of a small child. Had glassy green eyes and never seemed to look away. Never did tell anybody how much it bothered me. Strange things would always happen in that house. Still remember one morning in 2017. I was taking a quick shower before school, and I thought I saw the shadow of my dad standing between the bathroom and the hallway. I even called out to tell him that I'd be done soon, and there was no answer, and the light felt dimmer, like something was blocking it. Irritated, I yanked the shower curtain open, ready to yell at him. But the door was locked from the inside, and no one was there, and I stood dripping and shivering and confused. After that, the shadows became a familiar part of my nights. I'd wake up feeling watched, with my heart pounding and my eyes searching the dark. I could sense something at the edge of my vision near the doorway, by the window, behind the curtains. The doll stayed downstairs in the sitting room then. Never really saw it move, but passing that room always made my skin crawl. In the final year of her life, I moved back to help care for her. She'd been in that house for nearly 3 decades. My old bedroom had become a storage space, so I stayed in her old room, and the doll, it had been moved right into my former room. Every night I'd catch myself staring at the crack of the door, certain that there was something standing there. And after a while, the thing wasn't just at the door anymore. My computer would turn itself on at 2 or 3 a.m., bathing the room in a faint cold light. Then came the night I got sick. It started with waking in panics and breath being stuck in your throat and catching glimpses of something pacing the staircase. Something wearing the skull of an animal, its movements too smooth to be human. One night I was shoved down by nothing, like no one else was home except my grandmother, too weak to leave her bed, mind you. My father had to move back in to help. While my health got worse, the house grew louder. Whispers, laughter in empty rooms, dreams that felt like someone else was inside of them with me. My grandmother's health crumbled too, and in the end she had to be taken to the hospital. That's when the strange noise stopped. For a time there, only the presence of my late grandfather seemed to linger. A soft, steady presence that guided me to hidden things he left behind. Things my father later confirmed were real. Felt almost like protection. But peace never lasts long in that house. In the months after she passed, something else moved in. Not gentle, not familiar. It growled and spoke in this low, guttural syllables, then in full sentences that made my blood freeze. It knocked on walls and dragged its feet in the hallway at night. I left to stay with a friend, hoping distance would weaken whatever it was. When I returned last month to grab my belongings, the hallway upstairs is almost completely dark. I flicked on the bathroom light behind me to see better. As I stepped toward my room, a flash of blinding light exploded in front of me. My vision went black, and when it came back, a figure was standing there. A woman about my height, hair tangled and dark, skin rotting as if she'd been buried long ago. She didn't move, she didn't speak, but the air around her felt like a scream. I ran downstairs screaming before my partner could reach me. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that one. A few nights ago, went back to help, kept calm and moved through the house as a group. We took what I needed and left. Nothing happened that time, but the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like waiting. I don't plan on going back, not alone, not again. The shadow behind the shelf. I honestly never thought I'd end up talking about this. To be real, I used to roll my eyes whenever people said they'd seen ghosts. But the more these things keep happening, the harder it is to just brush it off now. I tried explaining it away. I tried to sound logical, but I've never experienced anything like this before. So I work overnight shifts as the main storage, in the main storage area of a hospital. And my shift usually starts around 9 p.m. and goes until just after sunrise. The storeroom is directly above what used to be an old autopsy lab, apparently sealed off decades ago. I didn't even know that at first, honestly. And weird stuff only began after someone casually mentioned it during a night break. I'm not the type that's really scared easily. At least I don't think so. I keep my earbuds in, I crank up the volume and pretend all those strange creaks and bangs are just the building doing stuff. And for a while it did work, but the light started to flicker randomly. At first I blamed old wiring, pretty easy. But the flickering followed me. And one time it even happened in the pediatrics wing, which is brand new and spotless. About a month ago, things got worse. One night, the lights in the storeroom pulsed hard, and at the exact same second, my phone screen glitched like an old TV. A week later, around 2 a.m., I'm looking down a list of items I needed to pull when something moved in the corner of my eye. Across the aisle, a dark head with unnaturally bright eyes peeked out from behind a shelf. One hand wrapped around the metal pole like a kid playing hide and seek. But when I turned to look fully, it didn't disappear. It slipped back quiet and deliberately, like it didn't want to be seen, but wasn't scared either. I told myself I was just overtired, but my body knew better. Then last night happened. I know the exact time because I ended up calling my mom in a panic. Around 1 a.m., while picking the last few items for the ER order, I heard something crash to the floor in a different aisle. I didn't look, I just turned my podcast louder and kept working. 5 minutes later, another crash, louder and closer. My hands were shaking so bad I had to stop what I was doing. Called my mom and asked her to stay on the line. I didn't want to explain, but she remembered the story I'd told her weeks ago. She told me to pray. I don't even consider myself religious, but in that moment I didn't argue. Took the delivery car to the NICU and then postpartum. Everything was fine, until I pushed the cart into the postpartum supply room. Hadn't even unpacked one box when the lights above me blinked violently like a strobe and my chest tightened. I bolted out of the room without even thinking. Tried asking one of the nurses at the station if they'd ever seen the lights do that. She gave me a look like I was losing it, and maybe I am. I keep telling myself it's not real and old wiring and stress, lack of sleep. But deep down, it doesn't feel like that anymore. I don't know what's in that storeroom. I just know it's not nothing. The Watcher in the Dark. I first saw the Shadow Man when I was 11 years old, and I'm now 30. It was sometime after midnight. I woke up to an odd creaking noise, and at the corner of the room near my desk stood a figure. He was impossibly tall, had a long black coat that almost touched the floor, a bowler hat tilted slightly to one side, glowing amber eyes, and long thin fingers that seemed to curl and uncurl like smoke. I couldn't see a face there. I could just see darkness. Frozen with fear, I pulled the blanket over my head and held my breath, and when I peeked again, he was just gone. And after that night, he started appearing more often. And I didn't tell a soul. But about a week later, my younger sister, 2 years younger, they showed me a strange sketch. It was the same figure, down to the hat and hands. When I asked, she said she saw him every night standing beside her window, tracing the glass with his long fingers. She'd hide under the blanket until the tapping stopped. So she left a drawing on her nightstand one evening. The next morning, she told me she woke to see him bending over her desk, tilting his head at the picture like he was studying it. She thought it was Dad and called his name. The figure snapped its head toward her, let out a low screeching sound, and vanished upwards. They left a faint black streak across the ceiling. The drawing was gone. We searched everywhere and it never turned up. The hauntings lasted through our teens, and sometimes we'd both see him at once, sometimes only one of us. I finally told Mom when I was 16. To my shock, she quietly admitted she'd been seeing him too, ever since we first moved into this house. She described the exact same hat, the same coat, the same hollow stare from dark corners. She said he always appeared just far enough away that she couldn't quite focus on his face. Things escalated after that. At first, it was the paralyzing nights, something pressing down on my chest and whispering just out of earshot. Then came scratches and bruises and the sound of pacing in the hallway. My father, the most skeptical of us, he changed his mind the night he was yanked by both ankles and dragged half off the bed. He said it felt like ice-cold hands locked around him. That was the first time he admitted it. He was shaken. He'd been wrong. We still live in the same house, and so does he. And even now, we see him almost weekly. Sometimes in the hallway, sometimes reflected in dark windows, sometimes in broad daylight. Once my sister, my boyfriend, and I were playing Mario Kart. He strolled right past the living room doorway, a solid silhouette moving slowly. We all stopped mid-laugh and stared at the same spot. Another time he leaned halfway around a door frame, staring directly at us for what felt like forever before melting into nothing. My parents once watched him drift through the dining room wall like a fog. Neither said a word for days after that. Visitors who know nothing about him often sense it too. close family friend once bolted out at 3 a.m. They were saying something had stood next to his bed, breathing against his ear. He never slept here again. Alongside the sightings, the house itself behaves pretty strangely. Lights flick on and off, and doors unlock themselves, and handles twist violently. Things are thrown, a hammer jar hurled from its shelf, a chopping board smashed on the tiles. Children's toys sailing across the rooms. Radios whisper on their own, and once I woke to find every closet and drawer in my room hanging wide open. Our dogs bark and whine at empty corners. They refuse to go into certain rooms. I keep reading about shadow people, but most stories are kind of one-off sightings. Ours has lasted nearly 2 decades. It's like he belongs to the house. Has anybody else lived with one this long? The Vanishing Stone. About 3 years ago now, I moved with my partner into our first real home. We were starting a family. We were full of excitement and plans for the future. And just down the road, not even 5 minutes away, was an old cemetery. It's the kind of place that feels peaceful rather than eerie. Wide paths and tall oak trees, rows of weathered headstones. Some of those headstones dated back over 100 years, the kind where you can't even quite see the writing anymore. From the moment my daughter was born, I took her there almost every other day. I snug her in her little carrier, walk and breathe in the quiet. Well, that sounds lovely. One cool spring afternoon, as the wind was gentle and the paths empty, I came across a headstone that made me stop. The name carved on it looked like it read Tyson, Tyson, the same as my mom's side of the family. Below it, halfway down, were the names William and Eliza. I'd never heard of them before. I snapped a photo of the stone to show my grandma later, curious about who they might be. I remember clearly telling myself I'd delete it once I showed her, and out of respect. I simply forgot. About 6 weeks later, went to the cemetery again, this time with my grandma and great-uncle. We were visiting another family grave, and I casually mentioned, I saw a Tyson headstone here, and William and Eliza were on it. My grandma's eyes lit up, and she said, I've always wondered where they ended up. William and Eliza were your great-great-grandparents. I had no idea that they were that close in our family line. Pulled out my phone, showed them the photo, but it was gone. It was completely gone. I scrolled through everything, no photo. I wasn't too spooked at first, just assumed I'd accidentally deleted it, and I walked them to the exact spot where I'd seen the stone. Except it wasn't there. I wandered up and down the path, my stomach turning pretty cold, and I can still picture that stone as clearly as if it were right in front of me. I can picture the shape in the gray-blue marble, and the way the letters curled at the ends. The patch where I saw it was empty, just grass and a few scattered leaves. I checked the nearby rows, thinking maybe I'd mixed up the location, but no, it was gone, like it never existed at all. Since then, I've been back countless times. Contacted the cemetery office, emailed the caretaker, even dug through birth and death records to confirm that William and Eliza Tyson were real. Well, they were, but according to the cemetery's official records, no such grave existed there. No headstone and no plot. It's been 3 years, and I've walked nearly every corner of that cemetery. I was pushing the stroller, and now with both my daughter and my baby boy. Even my partner helps. He mostly jokes that maybe I dreamt the whole thing, but I know I didn't. I saw it. I know I did. Was it a sign or something from another time? A moment where two worlds brushed up against each other. My family's always felt a strong pull towards spiritual things. My uncles had experiences. My son, even at 3, He said strange things we can't explain. Maybe it wasn't a mistake. All I ever wanted was to find that stone again, to bring flowers and give those ancestors the same care that we give the rest. But the stone, their stone, has vanished into the air. Whispers after closing. Hi. I've been working as a night security guard at a well-known nightclub here in Baja for a little over a year now. And during that time, my coworkers and I have experienced some truly unsettling things. I wanted to share a few of these stories with you. But before I do that, a little bit of background first. Although the current building isn't that old, the nightclub itself has been in business for over 4 decades now. The original location was just across the street. The owners decided to move here about 10 years ago. The new place has 3 main sections, a pretty lively cantina on the ground floor, a nightclub upstairs, and another adjacent area that used to host a second dance floor with different music. These days, that side section is used strictly as a storage space. It's locked most of the time. Things that have happened to me personally go as follows. Sometimes I work double shifts. And on my first morning shift, I went up to the nightclub level just to use the bathroom in peace. It was pitch dark, and the only thing I could feel was this strange, almost suffocating sensation. It's like somebody was standing behind me, watching closely. And not every day feels like that, but when it does, it's heavy. Another time, I'm upstairs changing out some old no-smoking signs near the bathrooms. And as I approached one, the sign suddenly ripped itself off the wall and flew a few feet toward me, like somebody had yanked it and thrown it. And I froze there and quickly ran to pull open the curtain to let some daylight in. Only the dim emergency lights were on, and it felt unbearably tense in there. There was also a night when I was making my usual rounds. I pointed my flashlight toward the bathroom, and I saw a figure stepping inside. Thinking it was a coworker about to do their business, I followed. What? The bathroom was completely empty. The creepiest thing for me happened in the back office, where there's a door that connects to the abandoned nightclub area. Went in to grab my radio and flashlight, and as I was about to leave, a soft voice whispered in Spanish. Oh boy. No te vayas, tengo miedo. Something like that. Don't go, I'm scared. And from behind that closed door, my blood ran cold. I pushed the door open and shone my light around, but nothing and no one. Stories from my coworkers. One of them told me that during the graveyard shift, he and his partner are standing near the dance floor. That's when a stack of heavy tables suddenly toppled over onto their own, and they're scattered everywhere. Another coworker swears he was shoved hard when walking down the back stairwell. He fell badly. He sprained his ankle too, and the incident was caught on camera. He never came back to work after that night, actually. Many staff members have said they've heard a woman's voice softly say, "Hey," near the office hallway. It's like somebody trying to get their attention. Some have heard stall doors in the restroom opening and closing by themselves, one by one, or have felt someone push the door from the outside, almost like trying to trap them inside. There's also been reports of random smoke appearing out of nowhere, and distant children laughing and whispering. And one night after closing, someone monitoring the security cameras, they saw a woman standing behind the bar counter as if she were searching for something. The image was crystal clear, but no one was actually there. Even the cantina isn't free from activity. Bar stools sometimes tip over on their own. Floating orbs have shown up on footage, and strange faces have been spotted on camera for just a second before vanishing. And as if that's not enough, friends who now work in the old building across the street, which was bought by another club, they say that they sometimes feel cold hand brushing against them in the restroom. Some even claim to have seen a pair of legs walking with no body attached. What do you think is going on? I hope they wash their hands. The case of the vanishing things. All my life, strange little disappearances have followed me. It got to the point where I just expected something to go missing. Whenever I had anything important, I'd carefully choose a spot, I'd double-check it, then even draw a little map of where I'd left it, like some kind of personal treasure hunt. And still, the next day, poof, gone. First thing I really remember losing was a small denim purse with sparkly patches on it. And inside were my kid treasures, like a few stickers, some play makeup, and my favorite thing in the world. A holographic Pokemon card of Suicune. I guess I am old because that is no Pokemon I've heard of. A holographic Pokemon card of Suicune? My brother had a crush on this girl who really wanted that card. And for years I swore he stole it for her, but the whole purse seemed to vanish. Not just the card. When I finally asked him about it again as adults, he swore that he didn't take it. He even reminded me that he eventually admitted to breaking my Bratz boy doll, the one he and my cousins destroyed when they heard ghost noises coming from my room. Those things are kind of creepy. My room back then, it was the creepiest place in the house. It was an old place, over a century old, and at least 2 people had died there. And there was this weird hole in the wall that led straight to the attic. And the attic could be entered through the garage, and we shoved a little dresser into the wall hole to block it. Never did stop feeling off, though. And another thing that disappeared is my favorite Barbie doll, actually 2 of them. One was a My Scene doll with long braids, and the other was a Kid doll from Atlantis. I liked swapping their heads so Kidda could have a body that actually bent in the knees and elbows, like in the movie. I was 14 and embarrassed about still playing with dolls, so I hid them deep underneath my mom's bed. When I finally reached for them again, there was nothing, and it was gone. Tore the space apart for years after, hoping one day they'd just turn up. And then there was the time I hid a small bag of weed under the bathroom sink. I even wrote down exactly where I stashed it. The next morning, it had disappeared without a trace. Did someone find your map? My older brother didn't live at home anymore, and my younger brother would have loved to get me in trouble if he found it. And if my mom had found it, well, I'd probably still be grounded, but none of them did. Our house was old, full of holes, and absolutely infested with mice. We once found a 4-foot rat snake skin in the living room, and a baby snake chilling in the spoon drawer like it owned the place. I used to joke the mice were stealing my stuff to decorate their tiny mouse mansions. But the thing is I moved, and my current house was built in 2014. No mice, no ghosts, no weird attic holes. Just me and my son. No one ever visits, and yet things still go missing. And a few years back, it was my AirPods, then the earbuds, then the case. And just this past week alone, my portable charger, some makeup, 1 headphone, and now my Apple Watch. And I keep my house spotless. It's a habit from growing up in chaos. I know exactly what I throw away. I never misplace important things. And just a few nights ago, the charger was right beside me, and I blinked and it was gone. starting to feel personal now, like the universe has its own invisible hand, plucking things out of my life for no reason at all, questioning my taste in Pokemon when I was a child, and I'm honestly starting to get angry about it. The blue balloon. About 2 months ago, I had this dream. I was working, like in a school, standing in the deputy's office with her, and through the glass door I saw a blue balloon drifting lazily across my classroom. And all of a sudden, the balloon didn't just pop, it burst into a spray of glitter with a sharp crack. Then the entire building went silent. Every single light went out at once. When I woke up, I laughed it off. Just another strange dream. I didn't tell anybody, and why would I? A week later, I arrived at work early one morning, and there it was, a single blue balloon tangled gently in the bushes by the main gate. I rolled my eyes, because probably from a birthday party, kids lose balloons all the time. Headed up to the deputy's office, ready to joke with her since I knew she couldn't stand balloons after watching It, the clown movie. So I began, "Hey, guess what I saw?" But she froze mid-step with eyes wide. Don't say it." "I already know. Just told me there's a blue balloon outside," and right as she said the words, there was this crack and the lights in the hallway went off. She looked genuinely unsettled, and she's one of the most skeptical people I know. I just stood there with my heart pounding. Not really because I had dreamed this exact moment, but because the power thing was too weirdly perfect to be a coincidence. There were only the three of us in the building at the time, and 5 minutes later I walked down to the classroom where this coworker was prepping activities. As usual, I paused at the doorway to check the floor. The kids often leave little wooden blocks or toy cars in the way, and the floor was completely clear. I remember that so clearly. So I walked to the shelf, I set my water bottle down, turned back toward the door, and there it was, a deflated blue balloon lying right in the doorway. It had not been there seconds ago, I don't think. No way I could have missed it. No one else could have slipped in, and we hadn't used balloons in the classroom in weeks. Well, I decided to shake it off and get on with the day. But things only got stranger. An hour later, the apprentice came to me, pale face as chalk, and she stammered, "You're not gonna believe me, but I was in the bathroom, and I heard someone humming in the far stall. But when I checked, it was empty, completely empty." Later, another coworker swore she saw a small table shift by itself, and one of the plastic chairs tip over like somebody had pushed it. Even though no one was near it, we all heard this sound. And over the years, I've had my fair share of odd moments in that school. Fleeting shadows and footsteps when no one's around. Whispers in the hallway. I've always been more of a sensitive person to that kind of thing. But that day, it was like the entire building decided to breathe with me. And the strangest part, it wasn't really the singing, or the chair, or even the lights. It was the blue balloon that I dreamed of long before it ever happened. Putting glitter in a balloon is a pretty good idea. I'm sure that's normal, but I've never heard of it. The shadow that knew I was there. Me and my girlfriend visited Eastern State Penitentiary a couple of years before the pandemic. That day turned into the most terrifying moments of my life. If you've ever been to Eastern State Pen, you'd know. It's basically paying to wander through a broken-down prison, Everything smells old and damp, and the walls are cracked, and there's this unsettling chill that sticks to your skin. The history is fascinating, but the place itself feels wrong. We skipped the audio tour, and we decided to explore on our own. Actually kind of fun at first. We poked our heads into old cells and walked down long hallways where the paint was peeling like dry skin. Took photos of everything. It was a hot July afternoon, around 4:30, aside from a few other visitors scattered around. Felt like we had the place to ourselves. Sunlight spilled in through broken windows and didn't make it feel any less eerie. We turned into one of the older cell blocks, the kind with narrow halls and rusted metal doors. Out of nowhere, my stomach tightened and this wave of dizziness hit me. I stopped at the entrance, pressing my hand against the wall to steady myself. It felt like someone or something was glaring at me without actually being there. My girlfriend had already walked ahead and laughing about something and peering into one of the cells. She had no idea what was happening behind her, and that's when I saw something. It stepped out of a cell about 30, maybe 40 feet down the corridor. It wasn't a person, at least not in any way that made sense. It was pitch black. Not just dark, but black like wet ink. It looked human-shaped, but had no face and no texture, no edges I could understand. Just a seemingly solid figure carved out of shadow. My body froze, and I couldn't run, and I couldn't yell. It felt like the air had turned to cement around me. And this thing, it radiated something heavy, like my chest was being crushed from the inside. My thoughts started repeating like a broken record. I shouldn't be here. It doesn't want me here. I shouldn't be here. We just stared at each other. Me breathing like I was underwater, and it completely still. It didn't make a sound, actually. And then as suddenly as it had appeared, it turned and slipped into another cell, as if it had melted into the wall. The moment it disappeared, my body snapped back into motion. I ran as fast as I could, grabbed my girlfriend by the arm and told her we were leaving. She didn't even have time to ask why before I pulled her toward the exit. And even now, I can still see it when I close my eyes, that blank, faceless shadow standing there like it knew me. And I'm Haitian. My mom still keeps a lot of old spiritual beliefs. But when I told her, she didn't hesitate. She said what I saw was not human. That thing was made of something dark, she told me. I don't usually believe in those kind of stories. I'm an atheist, but that day I can't explain it in any other way. I'll never forget it. And if anybody ever asks, I'll tell them Eastern State isn't just a prison museum. Something there is still watching you. Demon Behind the Glass. This is a nightmare that's clung to me like a shadow for years. It never faded like most bad dreams do. It felt otherworldly, as if something I couldn't explain was really happening. To set the stage a bit, I used to rent an apartment inside an old house that had been split into 2 units. The landlord lived on one side. My apartment was the other half. It was pretty obvious that what was now my living room had once been part of a sort of one large space. A set of old French doors separated my bedroom from the living room. When I lay in bed facing those doors, I could see straight through the living room to the windows on the other side. The first thing I remember is the air refusing to fill my lungs. I jolted awake drenched in cold sweat. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. I was lightheaded. I thought maybe it's my blood sugar. So I fumbled for my glucose meter. 155, not low, and Panic only worsened as I realized nothing was wrong. Yet everything felt wrong. I dragged myself to the bathroom, splashed my face with some water, and grabbed a washcloth. Hung it on the towel rack before heading back. Halfway down that short hall, I froze. My body just stopped responding. My legs felt as heavy as stone, and I tried to push forward. It was like walking underwater with cinder blocks tied to my ankles. My knees buckled, and I started clawing at the floor, inching forward, trying to reach my boyfriend's foot to shake him awake. Then, woke up in bed. I was disoriented and blinking. Was that a dream? My heart was still hammering, and I drifted back to sleep. But it didn't stop there. A little while later, I woke again. I turned on my side and started toward the living room windows. The blinds were tilted just enough that the lower part of the window was visible. A silhouette was standing there, just standing. I whipped my head toward my boyfriend, desperate to wake him. Then I woke up again. This time when I turned back, the silhouette had a face. The best way I can describe it is somewhere between Darth Maul and that demon thing from Insidious. I wanted to scream and to move, but before I could, everything blinked out again. It happened again and again. The figure appeared at the window, then behind the French doors, then inside the room. Each time I woke up, it felt closer. First outside the doors, then inside, then at the side of the bed, then at the foot of it. And eventually it was standing so close I swear I could feel its cold stare prickling the air on my skin. I must have woken up 10, maybe 15 times. My body felt real like each time, and the fear felt real. The weight in the air like dread, thick enough to breathe in. Sometimes it scratched at my legs, sharp and quick, enough to make me jolt but not draw blood. I slapped my face, I pulled my hair, I screamed at it. Anything to break the cycle. Nothing seemed to work. I kept waking into the same nightmare. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I opened my eyes to an empty room. The air felt normal again. My hands were shaking, but the thing was gone. Tears came before I even realized it. Relief and exhaustion and fear. I turned to my boyfriend wanting comfort. I shook him gently, was whispering his name. He slowly turned over to face me. It wasn't him, it was it. I didn't even get the scream out before I woke up again. The dread was gone this time. I slapped myself hard, and it stung. I was finally awake. Clock glowed 4:07 a.m. I didn't move until daylight struck. In the morning, I checked the evidence. My glucose monitor had a reading time-stamped around the time I first got up. The washcloth was still damp on the towel rack, so that part hadn't been a dream. But if I'd collapsed on the floor, how did I end up back in bed? I know it sounds insane, but I can't shake the feeling that my body went back to bed while my consciousness stayed behind me. Almost like my soul was walking around while I slept. And this wasn't my first brush with the paranormal either. My family's old house, the one I grew up in. It's old and full of stories. My great-grandmother lived and died there. She was blind and nearly deaf before she passed. She often talked about people moving through the walls and scratching and whispering. Everyone chalked it up to hallucinations, but over the years, other things happened too. My grandma still feels somebody sit on the end of her bed at night. My dad once woke to see an old woman knitting in a rocking chair who matches my mom's description of her grandmother. My mom sometimes astral projects in her sleep, wandering through houses that we haven't even visited yet, only to later recognize them in real life. As for me, I felt taps on my shoulder in empty kitchens, seen shadow figures dash across the room. I've woken up with scratches I couldn't explain. Streetlights flicker when I pass under them. Maybe there's a logical explanation for that night. Maybe it was sleep paralysis or panic attack or some strange hypnagogic loop. But even now, years later, I can still see that face at the window like it was last night. Some dreams you forget, some never let go. I second that. Whispers in Cell 7. I'm using a throwaway here for obvious reasons, but I'm a CO down in the Deep South. Just started my 7th year at this facility. I've always been kind of religious, nothing too serious, just the usual small-town church on Sundays. But I work in a pretty big county jail, and over the years I've had some weird stuff happen on night shifts. Working overnight, 20 to 0600, it's pretty quiet. The lights are dim most of the time, and you're by yourself trying not to nod off. So anytime I'd hear faint footsteps or a random voice, I always chalked it up to being tired or the building just, being old. So I've heard shoes scuff outside my control room when everyone's locked in. I've heard whispers from wings that have been shut down for months. But none of that really got underneath my skin. What happened about a week ago, though, I can't shake it. The floor I work on houses mid-security violent offenders. Assaults, robberies, domestic stuff. My nights usually go the same. I lock everyone down, do a standing head count. If the roster, say 160, I count 160. Then I sit in the control room watching the monitors. We're in the middle of quote-unquote modernization upgrades and tongue fumbles. New steel doors, new locks, furniture, and most importantly, new cameras. Every pod is full except for B pod, which is under renovation. No inmates there. The new cameras feed directly into a small monitor in the control room, and each cell number shows the bottom right corner of the screen. So basically what I'm driving at is I don't even bother counting B-pod, it's supposed to be empty. But about a week ago, after I finished head count, I sat back down in the control room, scrolling through the internet like I always do. Around midnight, I glanced at the monitor out of habit, and in B-pod cell 7, I swear I saw someone standing dead center facing the cell door. I blinked, I looked again. Gone. Told myself it was a trick of the light and maybe the feed glitched. 30 minutes later, I set my phone down. I stretched a bit. Glance up again. This time, no mistake. Someone is in cell 7, door wide open. I bolt down the hallway, I just badge the door and storm into the pod, and there's nothing. I put in a maintenance report, and next day they tell me everything's fine. The wiring is good, camera correctly linked to B-Pod 7. I convinced myself I was tired. Next night, I keep one eye on the monitor, and midnight comes and goes, and there's nothing. I must laugh at myself for freaking out. Then 0200 hits. I'm back in the chair. All doors in B-Pod are still propped wide open, and those doors are heavy, at least 70 pounds each. Then suddenly, cell 7's door slams shut like somebody let it go from the inside. A second later, it sounds like something is kicking it from within, not tapping, but kicking, like a damn horse. Every camera feed in B-Pod starts to blink. I go in anyway. I'm supposed to. Halfway up the stairs, another door slams, then another, one after another. I ran out, and I'm not ashamed to say it. Supervisor comes down, we pull footage from the server. 0200 hits, and every feed from that pod cuts out. Maintenance says it wasn't a lock malfunction. The fresh paint on the frame of 7 chipped. I went through 5 years of incident reports. Nothing about deaths in that pod. But sealed reports do exist. Wouldn't be the first time something ugly got buried in paperwork. Now they're almost done with B pod and will move on to C, and I'm hoping when those other pods get emptied, whatever this is doesn't follow. Doors still creak and occasionally close on their own, but not like that night. I've put in for vacation into May. Maybe stepping away will help me shake it off. I've never been one to believe in ghosts, but I don't think AC can slam a steel door like that. If anyone's got a similar story, I'm all ears. The Quiet House at Maple Street. Ah, Maple Street. How familiar you are. The house I spent most of my childhood in was a little bit strange. It was an old 3-bedroom place from the 1960s. It had a sunroom that my parents turned into a tiny playroom. We didn't know until years later that the woman who used to live there had passed away peacefully in that very sunroom. One night I woke up. I looked down the hallway from the lower bunk, through the soft glow from the nightlight in the bathroom. I saw someone tall, just standing still at the end of the hall. It wasn't Mom or Dad. I just shut my eyes and I whispered to myself, "Nope, that's not real." Forced myself to sleep. When my parents moved my brother and my bunk bed into the sunroom to make space for my baby sister, my aunt gifted us a life-size Cinderella doll. Sometimes when we woke up, it was lying somewhere completely different from where we had left it. But the scariest time was one summer night. At the time, I had left it leaning against the wall by the bookshelf. And when I woke up around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom, it was standing upright in the middle of the hallway facing my room. I stared at it for a good 30 seconds. Decided the bed was safer than the bathroom. When I tell people about that, they always say, "Probably your brother messing with you." But my brother, now in his 30s, he swears he was terrified of that doll too. He would never keep a prank like that secret for this long. My sister had way more weird things happen to her in that house than I did, actually. I still think I got off easy. Years later, as an adult, I'm driving home around 1:30, turning onto Maple Street. I saw under the dim yellow streetlight a figure taller than any person should be, maybe 8 feet tall, thin as a pole. It didn't move, and I blinked and it was gone. I've also experienced some intense hypnopompic hallucinations, but once I felt something tugging at my blanket, then grabbing my ankles hard, dragging me toward the floor. When I actually woke up, I'm still in bed and I'm sweating and shaking. Another time, when I was exhausted from taking care of my baby, I woke up to a strangely bright room. There was a faceless gray creature clinging to the upper corner of the ceiling like a lizard. I muttered, "Nope, that's not real," and rolled over. Not too long ago, I woke to find my closet door wide open. I always close it before sleeping because I really, really don't want to see anything in there. Closed my eyes and I refused to look again. In the morning, it was shut. The weirdest thing recently happened after I brought home a fox skull I found near a creek to put on my altar. In that first week, I heard faint clinking in the kitchen and what sounded like soft footsteps. I finally whispered out loud, telling whatever was there to stop. The house has been quiet ever since. Fox skull on an altar. Shadows that stayed behind. My parents and I, we live in a creaky old house on a quiet cul-de-sac for almost 8 years now. And during that time, they argued nearly every single day. These weren't small disagreements. They were terrifying, full-blown fights. Shouting, slamming doors, and throwing things. It was like something in that house pulled the worst out of them. We started noticing other strange things, too. My dad would wake up and find the TV unplugged or the toaster sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor. And those were times when he was sure everything had been put away the night before. And we had a small cellar instead of a basement. I dreaded going down there after sunset. The air was heavy and cold, like it wanted me gone. Or to preserve potatoes and such. Whenever I bent over to grab something from the dryer, the feeling of something watching me from behind was so strong it made my hand shake. I never once turned around. One afternoon, my uncle was visiting for lunch. We were halfway through our food when a long dragging noise came from below. It sounded like a big trash bag, like it was scraping slowly across the cellar floor. Not a bump, not a drop, a slow, deliberate drag. All of us froze, and then for reasons I can't explain, we just pretended it didn't happen. We kept eating like cowards. When my parents finally went to counseling and started fixing their marriage, things changed for them. But that's exactly when I began to fall apart. Depression crept in slowly, and then came the nightmares. Every night I dreamed of something black and formless, would be whispering awful things to me, would tell me I didn't belong and that I should end everything, and I always woke up gasping and fumbling for the light switch. The dread started spilling into the daytime. I stopped sleeping altogether some nights. I just couldn't face what waited in my dreams. One night stands out. I'm sitting alone on the couch, headphones on, watching some cheesy sitcom reruns. And out of nowhere, my entire body went cold, not like a chill, but like my blood froze. I ripped my headphones off. I paused the show. I just sat there. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. But I've never felt fear that big. It was like something was next to me without being seen, and then just like that, it was gone. A few months before we moved out, something happened that still knots my stomach. So I woke up around 2:45 a.m. My little dog, a sweet 15-pound fluff ball who was scared of his own reflection, they were asleep at my feet. I saw a shadow slide under my door like somebody walking past, and I heard footsteps. My dog shot up and launched himself onto my chest. He was snarling with a deep, vicious growl I didn't even know he was capable of. His fur was standing straight up. He didn't bark, just stared at the door like he was ready to fight something. Well, I tried to convince myself it was just one of my parents getting up for water. Maybe he had some kind of a bone to pick with them. The next morning, I asked them who'd been up all that last night, and they both said they hadn't moved, and that's when the fear settled in deep into me. The night before moving day, I had the worst dream of all. Something invisible was grabbing me, slamming furniture and screaming, "You can't leave!" I woke up sobbing. I was unable to breathe properly. My chest felt like it was being crushed, and I don't even have asthma. But the first night in our new house was silence. No dread, no whispers, no shadows. It's been over a year now, and it's like I can finally breathe again. My family is very religious. We've always believed that speaking too much about these things gives them power. We've never owned anything occult, and no strange antiques, nothing like that. But I can tell you this. We didn't bring it with us. It stayed there. I still feel that heavy pressure in my lungs every time we drive past that old street. Just so you know, if you're folks were fighting a whole lot at a certain place. And then, even though things get better, that might have still bothered you a bit deeply, but if it's all happening at the time, your body goes into a defensive mode, and then when it's finally over, then you might start processing all of that stuff and have a bad connection with that place and have a lot of really bad anxiety and symptoms. It's like your body can now afford to react to it, because if you reacted to it while it was happening, it would have made things worse. Just a psychological point. Through the half-open curtain. It was 2:37 a.m., and that's when I suddenly sat upright, my lungs burning like I had surfaced from deep water. And for a second, I was stunned and disoriented. This kind of thing was supposed to happen in horror films, not in my quiet apartment. My shirt had clung to my skin, drenched in cold sweat. My pulse thudded in my ears, and my fingers trembled like autumn leaves. First thought was my blood sugar. Low levels often felt like this. Didn't even consider waking my partner. No panic, just orange juice and I'd be fine. This sounds familiar. I stumbled through the narrow doorway connecting our bedroom to the kitchen. The digital clock on the microwave glowed dimly, and I checked my sugar levels. 128. Perfect. Washed my hands, I checked again. Still 128. That's when the unease settled deeper. I splashed cool water on my face, hoping it would wash away the invisible weight pressing on my chest. Helped a little, but not enough. Also familiar. The entrance to the bathroom was tucked into a tiny hallway. Halfway through, my knees gave out. It was like walking into invisible cement. I tried to lift one foot, then the other, but they were stuck there. Panic burned its way up my throat. My body collapsed onto the cold wooden floor. This was when I decided, maybe I should wake him. I tried to call out, and nothing but a rasp of air. I tried to crawl, but my limbs felt heavy and dragged down by unseen hands. My vision blurred at the edges. The last thing I remember was reaching out toward the end of the bed, my hands inches from my partner's foot before the world folded into black. When I opened my eyes, I'm back in bed and disoriented. What the hell just happened? I whispered to myself. My boyfriend was snoring softly beside me. No ambulance, no chaos, no explanation. I tried convincing myself it had just been a dream. And after a long stretch of staring at the ceiling, I shifted onto my side, the one facing the curtain. The curtain over the sliding door wasn't fully shut. A thin sliver of night bled into the room. I stared at that gap, debating whether to fix it, and I decided to leave it. But then movement, just beyond the curtain at the edge of the patio. A figure stood too still and too close. I turned to shake my partner, and just as my hand brushed his arm, I woke up again. My heart plummeted, and I forced myself to look at the curtain. This time, the figure was closer, right at the glass. I turned away, and I woke up again. Each time, the distance between us shrank, until finally I was there, inches away, with its face pressed against the glass. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide. It's as though it had been drawn with the wrong proportions, and its eyes were pits reflecting nothing. I screamed, woke up again, and it was in the living room. Woke again at the side of the bed, woke again reaching for me. At least it didn't look like Darth Maul, I guess. I couldn't move, and I couldn't speak, and I couldn't breathe. My lungs screamed for air as its hand grazed the blanket. I jerked awake, facing the window. Empty, nothing there, and my relief was short-lived, though. At the foot of the bed, it grinned, and it didn't vanish this time. I felt it grab my ankle, and the touch burned like frost. I woke up again and again and again. This girl needs some Ambien. About 15 loops, and each time it was bolder, and I slapped myself, pinched my skin, screamed silently. Nothing pulled me fully out, and I could feel everything, every touch, every whisper of breath on my skin. Then finally, after what felt like years crammed into minutes, I woke for real, I thought. My partner slept peacefully. No figure, no curtain movement. My body was slick with sweat. Tears blurred my sight as I let out a shaky breath, and I reached to shake him awake for comfort. He'd turned over, and it wasn't him. The grin, the black eyes, the lack of looking like Darth Maul, but similar description. And this laugh that promised pain. I woke up again, and this time, the dawn light bled softly through the curtains at 5:13 a.m. I checked the kitchen. The glucose meter held 2 readings from that night. Curtain really had been half open. A damp washcloth still hung in the bathroom, but everything else a blur. How did I get back into bed after collapsing, and why did the bruising on my ankle match the places it grabbed me? 6 years later, I still don't have an answer. Maybe part of me stayed behind in that hallway. Maybe it was something my brain will never make sense of. Maybe this is a slight re-edit of the story from the first one I read, and maybe the editor is drunk. I don't know him. But anyway, every night before I go to sleep, I make sure that the curtain is closed every single night. Nobody likes bleeding light coming through them either. The Man by the Closet. Last winter, in the middle of December, my mom was admitted to the hospital. I moved in with my sister for a while. She let me stay in the guest room downstairs, right next to the laundry area. The first couple of nights went by without much trouble. I tried to stay positive even though my mind was constantly on my mom. But on the 4th night, something seemed to shift. I had trouble falling asleep, not just because of my worries, but because of the strange noise. You see, there's an old storage cabinet in that corner of that room, and that night I could hear something inside it. It wasn't just a creak or a small thump, it was a steady dragging. It was like somebody was pushing around something heavy on the floor. And the cabinet isn't big at all, and that made the sound even more unsettling. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was just the house settling, or pipes, or the laundry room, or a machine or something making weird noises. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that just wasn't my imagination. And I've always believed in the paranormal, and I kind of had experiences that I can't explain. But at that moment, I didn't want to face anything else, really. My heart was already carrying too much. Every few minutes, the dragging sound would stop. And then something new started, a faint scraping outside the tiny basement window. It wasn't like an animal. It sounded metallic, like something sharp was being drawn slowly across the glass. And at some point, I drifted off, but I woke up in the middle of the night to a room that felt too dark. The soft nightlight that should have filled the room with a warm glow seemed almost swallowed by the shadows. And that is when I saw him. A man stood near the cabinet, incredibly tall. So tall his head nearly brushed the ceiling. His clothes looked torn, like they'd been dragged through the dirt, and he had long, unkempt hair and a beard to match. His arms were crossed. His presence was so heavy it felt like the air was thickening around him. Then his head turned, slowly, and his eyes met my eyes. Those few seconds of eye contact seemed to stretch endlessly, and I couldn't move and I couldn't breathe. And then, just as sudden as he'd appeared, he was gone. The room seemed to brighten, and the nightlight worked again. I grabbed my phone, and it was 4:12 a.m. I didn't dare close my eyes again. The next day, I told my sister what happened. She turned pale and whispered, "Don't tell my husband or the kids. They'll never come down here again." I didn't argue. Since then, I've been kind of down in that room plenty of times. Haven't seen the man again, but I can't shake the feeling that something about that basement isn't exactly empty. It's like the air remembers, and sometimes late at night, I swear, I can still hear that faint scraping at the window. The Night Visitors. Okay, so this happened around a year ago. I just set up my LED lights for the first time, and at night I always kept them on a soft blue. Helped me calm down. One night the air in my room suddenly felt heavier and colder than usual. My room's in the basement, so it's normally chilly, but this time it felt different. My door was shut and my windows were locked. I could feel something shifting around me, like a quiet current of air brushing past my skin. Not long after, I started to feel eyes on me. I'd look around and there'd be nothing. But every so often, when the blue light hit the corner of my room just right, I would see a tall figure standing there. It was a shadow with a long coat and a hat, like somebody standing out of an old photograph. He didn't move, he just stood there blending into the darkness. And that was just the beginning. A few nights later, things got a bit worse. And I saw her, a woman or something that looked like one. She was clinging to my ceiling, thin as paper, her tangled black hair spilling around her face. Her skin was so pale it was almost glowing. And where her eyes should have been were just hollow, dark sockets. Her mouth wasn't really there, just a stretch of skin. Her hands were long and sharp, like she could almost peel the air open if she wanted to. Every time she appeared, I couldn't move. I was awake, wide awake, but frozen. I'd blink and she'd vanish, and the Shadow Man too. The cold would stay, though. It always stayed. I started dreading the gap between the headboard and the wall. I couldn't stop imagining something waiting there, fingers just barely out of sight, ready to grab the back of my neck. Then came that night. I'd just turned off my phone. I was ready to sleep. But when I opened my eyes again, they were both there. The shadow in the corner, the woman on the ceiling, and something or someone breathing softly behind me. I stared at the man first, then up at her. I blinked once, twice, and they didn't leave. The air turned icy, almost biting. And then, for the first time, she moved. Her head tilted slowly like a doll someone twisted too far. One of her hands reached down, fingers curling toward me. My chest locked up, and for a moment, I actually wanted to reach out back, like something was pulling me toward her. But I didn't. I squeezed my eyes shut, and when I opened them again, the room was empty. But the cold felt alive. I haven't seen them in full since then, but sometimes the temperature drops without warning. Sometimes I swear I can hear soft breathing where no one is. The last time I felt him, the shadow was like maybe last November. That was when I was sick and feverish and sweating too. I was too weak to move. I woke up around 3 or 4. Air was freezing. I opened my eyes and a black shape hovered inches from my face. That was the last time I actually saw anything, but not the last time I felt it. Whatever they are, they only come here and only in this room. South Carolina Mountain Road. I've been a fan of this sub for a while, so I Guess it's about time I shared something of my own. This happened just last summer, right at the start of the season. My mom and I were on our way to spend a weekend at my Nana's place. And for some quick background, Nana lives on a small farm tucked away deep in the country, right at the base of a mountain in rural South Carolina. It's the kind of place where the road narrows into two cracked lanes. All the paint is kind of weird on those roads, like they keep going over it and over it and over again, and sometimes they put it over a pine cone and that part kicks away and you get this cool little shape of a pine cone. But there's barely enough space for two cars to pass. That's my main point. Houses are hidden back in the tree line and they're scattered pretty far apart. And once the sun goes down, the only light you get is from your headlights. We're driving with Mom behind the wheel and I'm riding shotgun. That's the passenger seat. It was close to 11 p.m. We're about 10 or 15 minutes away from Nana's place. The radio was barely audible, just some soft static coming through the dark. We rolled onto this long, straight stretch of road between two dense walls of forest when something sudden and something fast cut across the headlights. It was a blur at first, but both Mom and I saw it clearly enough to know what we were looking at. The thing was big. It was taller than a person. Almost Shaquille O'Neal size, or at least as big. Couldn't make out its head, but what stuck with both of us was the way its body looked. It was segmented. Mom said later, like you could see each bone or rib pressing out beneath the skin. Didn't really seem to have any fur. It was just dark, and there was bare surfaces that caught the light weirdly. Its limbs were long, or naturally long. It didn't move like a deer or a dog. It sort of loped, pulling itself with its front limbs like it was half crawling and half gliding. It moved fast. As it crossed in front of us, both of us blurted out something like, "What the hell is that?" The moment we reached the spot where it had just crossed, I turned in my seat to follow it with my own eyes. And I swear it stood up. Not clumsily, not like a bear balancing. It rose smoothly, like it was used to walking that way, and then it ran on two legs bipedal. I shouted that it had stood up, and Mom's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. My mom isn't the type of person to jump at shadows. She's logic first. But the way she went quiet told me this wasn't just my imagination. She made me promise not to say anything to Nana, said she didn't want to spook her, and made it feel all the more real. And here's the kicker. Around that same time, people in the area had been talking. Livestock attacks, horses injured, and fences torn through like they were paper. Nobody knew what it did exactly, but whatever it was strong. Still don't know what we saw that night on the mountain road, but I know for sure that we both saw it. Interesting comparisons. The shattered silence. In 2016, I flew from Melbourne to Edinburgh. That was to, attend an engagement party of a close colleague's daughter. I had also lined up several in-person strategy meetings for the following week. Getting there was pretty chaotic, honestly. During our layover in Kuala Lumpur, a flock of starlings forced emergency inspection after a few got caught in the plane's engine on descent. No. Sorry, I like birds. So it threw everything off schedule, and by the time I finally arrived in Scotland, I felt like I'd lived a whole other lifetime. The engagement party itself was lovely. There was live folk music, far too much champagne, and a long conversation with a retired engineer. He told me stories about old castles and broken windows and winter storms. I stumbled back to my hotel late that night. I was buzzing with jet lag and, to be fair, alcohol in equal measure. The next afternoon, it all hit me at once. The sleepless flight, the 6-hour time difference, and the endless rounds of toasts. I postponed my first meeting and collapsed into bed what I swore would be like a short nap. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was leaking through the curtains. I guessed it had only been out for maybe an hour. Forced myself to get up before sleep could drag me down again. But as I tried to move, I realized I couldn't, not even a twitch. My chest felt heavy and I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I pushed every ounce of strength into breaking whatever was holding me down, and right at that moment a deafening crack split through the air. The huge floor-to-ceiling window in my room had fractured, a perfect spiderweb of glass. I sat up gasping, finally free of the paralysis, and the timing was so exact it felt like I'd somehow caused it, like one of those movie scenes where a character discovers they have powers they can't control. And the night before, that retired engineer had mentioned that on rare occasions, old double-paned glass can burst on its own due to trapped air pressure changes. That is true. I hadn't thought much of it then, but hearing it less than 24 hours before the window in my room exploded, well, that was unsettling. When I called the front desk, they panicked for a moment, and apparently, sudden explosions make people uneasy around here. Really? The security officer rushed up and inspected the scene, moved me to a different room. He told me that decades earlier the hotel had been damaged in an actual bombing during the Troubles during the Troubles. And people hadn't forgotten. I lay in that new room that night and I'm staring at the ceiling, listening for cracks in the dark. I knew it was probably just a coincidence, just old glass giving up. But in that moment, it felt like something far stranger was at work. Rest in peace, birds that got sucked into a jet engine. Hey guys, thanks for listening. And please keep in mind if you have any criticism, constructive or otherwise. I accept both versions. Please write me in any way that you can find. And to some certain mischief managers, my heart goes out to you. Sweet dreams. See ya.